U današnjem intervjuu razgovaramo sa gospodinom Besnikom Bislimijem, prvim potpredsednikom Vlade Kosova. Ovo je naš prvi intervju u ovoj godini. Gospodine Bislimi, srećna nova godina i hvala vam što govorite za Radio Goraždevac.
Many thanks for the opportunity to address your audience. Also from my side, I wish you a successful 24 and happy Christmas.
Pored toga što ste i prvi potpredsednik Vlade, vi ste neko ko je glavni pregovarač Prištine u dijalogu sa Beogradom i ne možemo da se nekako, da ne započnemo ovaj razgovor tim dijalogom između Kosova i Srbije. Kako vidite godinu koja je za nama, šta je propalo, šta je uspjelo, da tako kažemo, i koliko je, ako je nešto uspjelo tokom ove godine?
Well, 2023 started with a lot of optimism. We had this French-German proposal that was disseminated to the parties with the idea that it has the potential to solve, let's say, 99% of the outstanding issues between Kosovo and Serbia. We managed to have an agreement in Brussels on February 27th, and then we agreed to sign the document in Ohrid on March 18th once we agree on the implementation plan as well. However, in Ohrid, the Serbian President Vučić submitted a letter explaining that he cannot sign the document because of constitutional issues back in Serbia. However, we saw very soon that the idea was not constitutional complications, but the fact that he wanted to publicly state that he has not accepted the agreement, which he did both on March 18th, right after the meeting, and then the next day. And an agreement that was supposed to bring us to normalization, due to the lack of signature, created additional complication, and with the event in Banska, it turned to be an agreement on the path to conflict, pretty much. And this is very unfortunate because the agreement as such had the potential to bring us much closer. However, on the positive side, I have to say that still, thanks to the constructiveness of both citizens in the four municipalities in the north, but also the government of Kosovo, we managed to successfully, despite all the tensions and problems, culminate with one problem less, which is the car plates. And in the same time, we managed to record some progress on the energy issues, expecting that from January 1st, Electrosabra will start nominating the consumption of energy for the four municipalities. And
šta mislite, hoće li biti implementiran francusko-nemački predlog tokom 2024. godine?
Well, we believe that 2023 was very suitable for a full implementation of the agreement because it was a year free of elections, both in Kosovo and Serbia, but also with the main friends, international friends, and or stakeholders of this agreement. At some point, we found this obstruction in the form of elections in Belgrade, and we see that these elections will produce further complications due to the fact that it was decided to repeat elections in some of the cities in Serbia, and this will then further postpone the deadline for the formation of the new government. And at the moment when you have the new government in Belgrade, which will be responsible for implementing the agreement, we start having rounds of elections in the EU for the key bodies, but also then later in the US. This will complicate things, but we still believe that if there is energy and willingness of both parties, we can move on despite this, let's say, side effects or side developments.
Vlada Srbije je krajem decembra 2023. donela odluku o priznavanju RKS tablica. Da li može da se očekuje isto to i od Vlade Kosova u nekom narednom periodu?
Well, two elements. First, we have a statement made public by the authorities in Belgrade that the government has decided to accept the car plates with RKS. However, you cannot find this decision on the website of the government of Serbia. So either it's due to the lack of transparency or it has to do with the methodology, how they publish the documents, but they have published several decisions made on the 25th, but you cannot find a decision on our case car plates. Second, back in September 2021, we developed or created two working groups, Kosovo and Serbia, that had the mandate to produce a long-term, permanent, European-based solution on the car plates, and Kosovo had one proposal. Let us recognize the car plates of each other and move on this because both car plates are according to the EU standards. However, our proposal was not accepted by Serbia, and instead we had tensions, we had blockades, we had cars being burned. All of this, so we achieved at a point when we say, okay, the initial proposal of Kosovo was the right one, so let's move in that direction. Now, to come to the question that you made, once our authorities report that Serbia is fully implementing this agreement or this decision, and I see the decision somewhere printed or published, then Kosovo also will act upon that and produce the same decision, which means stickers will belong to the past. Because we believe that actually we ended up in a paradox where Serbia is penalizing Kosovars with Serb nationality and we are penalizing more Albanians from the Preševo Valley, because these are people that more frequently use the interstate travel.
Zar u takvim nadmetanjima, da tako kažemo, upravo građani nisu ti koji su kolateralna šteta svega toga?
We are supposed to make decisions for the benefits of citizens, not at the cost of citizens. That's why I think it would have been much smarter to accept our proposal back in January 2022. Today we will not be discussing the issue of car plates at all. We will be behaving normally as every country in Europe.
Sve ono što se dešavalo na severu, dezintegracija severa, da je tako nazovemo, podsjetit ću da su Srbi izašli iz svih tih institucija. Kako nadoknaditi tu štetu? Da li je izgradnja tih baza jedini put? Ima li mogućnosti da se dogovorite nešto sa lokalnom zajednicom ili neka moja iskustva i razgovori sa ljudima na severu kažu da to sa izgradnjom baza izgleda jako užasno kao poruka lokalnim građanima?
Well, if it looks like that, I want to send a message that that's not the reason. We don't want to scare the citizens. We want to ensure that they live in a safe environment. Because after the withdrawal of the police officers, there was a security vacuum. And the Banjska case and the case of kidnapping of 3 police officers on June 14th was the best signal that this security vacuum cannot exist, but it will be filled by paramilitary structures.
Hoće li se to nekog dana završiti ili će te baze koje se grade ostati dugoročno na severu?
Well, I cannot predict the future. I hope there will be less need for additional security measures, but North, as a part of Kosovo, needs and deserves the same safe environment as every part of Kosovo, and this is what the government wants to provide. But I believe there will be less necessity once we can ensure that Serbia is not a security threat anymore. I think there will be less presence of the special police. But the special police is of Kosovo, and it will be located somewhere. If it is not a problem if they're located in Jakova, if there is no problem if they're located in Štrbce, it should be seen as the police of Kosovo tomorrow, hopefully with much more Serbian police officers among the special police.
Ali zar to ne šalje poruku da se vlada silom? Podsjetit ću i da se i neki političari unutar albanske zajednice, poput Gazmenda Muhadžerija, gradonačelnika Peći, ne slažu sa onim što vlada radi na severu. On je u jednoj izjavi čak rekao da premijer Kosova radi isto Srbima na severu koji su 99% populacije, kao što je Milošević 90-ih radio Albancima u Glogovcu ili u Drenici, na primjer.
Well, government does not develop policies to satisfy irresponsible policymakers, local policymakers like Mr. Muhajiri. I think in his tentative to play a politician at the national level, he failed completely because he believed that this is the way how you play the opposition. However, you should not put any importance to the statements of such irresponsible policymakers. Again, as long as people like Raducic are free and organizing paramilitary gangs around the border of Kosovo, in Kopaonik, in Grey Hotel and others, there is a need for additional security for the benefits of citizens there. And you have the same signal also from KFOR with increased by three times of the regular patrols at the border. I think the citizens will be the final beneficiaries of this increased security, and the reports that we get are that citizens are increasingly reporting their problems to the police, which means the trust is being established. We understand the concern of the Serb citizens in the north. We understand the extent to which they are also exposed to propaganda on the intent of these police officers. But I think in the case of Banjska, it was best proved that there is a need and that this police is serving the citizens. You have seen the video footage of how the police is offering food and other to the citizens and how this is being accepted by all the citizens, including kids in Banjska and around that. I think once this mutual trust is built further, once the integration becomes meaningful and also includes economic aspects, which you are working on that, we will see a completely different narrative in the north.
Ima li u tom nekom kontekstu nekih izgleda da će se uskoro održati izbori, vanredni lokalni izbori, da se građani vrate u institucije? Postoji li zapravo u tom kontekstu neki interni dijalog sa građanima, organizacijama civilnog društva, sa bilo kim ko predstavlja srpsku zajednicu na severu?
Well, according to the administrative instruction, it is fully in the hands of the civil society and the citizens of the north when these elections will happen. We have this initiative of a group of citizens in the north. If I'm not wrong, it's the Građanska inicijativa Kaza or something like that, that started the request for petition for the recall of mayors. They submitted the request at the level of assembly, and this request made it to the Central Election Committee. The Central Election Committee produced a letter informing them on the threshold that is needed for the petition to be valid. And now it's up to them to start collecting the signature. I've seen the numbers. I think with a little bit more involvement, they can collect the signatures within 1 week. And then the process rolls, nobody can stop it. And it is in the interest of all of us to have these elections there so that new mayors can take over and then build the infrastructure that can start implementing, spending the budget and preparing or drafting their own budget.
Kada je zajednica srpskih opština u pitanju, dosta je bilo reči u nekom prethodnom periodu o tome. Kosovo je potpisalo taj sporazum, Srbija takođe, ali još uvek nema krajnjeg statuta, nema upravljačkog tima, ko je za to odgovoran i ko treba da formira taj upravljački tim. Beograd kaže da je to ekskluzivno pravo Srba, Kosovo s druge strane kaže da to što oni hoće nije po ustavu. I gde smo sada?
Well, before February 27th, 2023, we were discussing individually post agreements. What happened with the agreement on IB, integrated border management? What is happening with the agreement on custom stamps? What is happening with this? On 27th February this year, we signed an agreement on the path to normalization, which is not the main document as a guiding document for us in the process of normalization. And that as such, it is comprehensive because it includes all previous agreements. Paragraph 10 of this agreement says, parties commit to implement all past obligations deriving from the dialogue. In the implementation annex, it says that parties commit to honor all articles of the agreements without any delay or precondition, and it also states that they will not block each other on the path to integration. Now what is left is that we agree on the sequence. For this sequence, there are 2 or 3 guiding principles. The first guiding principle is that you have to do something in order to get something. The second guiding principle is that everything that is in the basic document has to be reflected in the implementation sequence. Based on this, USR, Mr. Lachak, is developing some proposals, and we are negotiating on those proposals. ASM is part of Article 10. As soon as we agree on the sequence, then parties are obliged to start the implementation. In this implementation, the process is set that way that during each phase of the work with the ASM, the first phase is the endorsement of the draft statute, the second is the decision of the Constitutional Court, then there is the decision of the government, and the fourth element of the process is the establishment. In all of these 4 phases, Serbia has to deliver obligations on the path to de facto recognition. At the moment when we are ready to establish the body called ASM, or whatever name we give it to him, because the ASM is not a trademark, Serbia has to complete the de facto recognition. This is the current position of everybody, including Serbia. What they say publicly is for internal consumption. In Brussels, they say we will fully de facto recognize Kosovo. In their perspective, the first development or the first decision they have to make is to recognize all passports, all IDs, every document, birth certificates, everything that Kosovo institutions produce. They have to recognize at the moment when the Kosovo authorities endorse the document draft statute. Now to the question on the management team. Management team was a temporary body that was charged with the task of drafting the first document or the first version of the draft statute, and their mission did end effectively on the day of presentation, May 2nd, 2023. If they had produced a document that is in line with the Kosovo legislative framework, we would have been much more advanced right now. But what they have produced was seen as Republika Srpska 2.0 or plus, according to USR, which then complicated the things and even incentivized some international actors to take that role and produce a new document, which you have seen in the form of the latest draft proposal.
U kontekstu odluke Ustavnog suda vezan za zajednicu srpskih opština, ne mogu a da se ne dotaknem i ove druge odluke koje se odnosi na vraćanje zemlje manastiru Visoki Dečani. Kada će Vlada Kosova i njene institucije vratiti zemlju, odnosno ispoštovati odluku Ustavnog suda?
First, the decision of the Constitutional Court regarding to the 24 hectares of land and the monastery in Dečan, this is not part of the dialogue, hence it does not fall under my portfolio. I don't cover that, and we don't discuss this in Brussels as a matter of dialogue. This is an issue of the Constitutional Court and the local authorities and the cadastral office. So that's why I cannot answer this question right now, but I know the concerns of the domestic policymakers with the quality of that decision of the Constitutional Court. Our Constitutional Court is known for producing controversial documents on decisions, and we see this on a daily basis because we believe that they lack competence and they lack credibility. And this is not the only decision of the Constitutional Court that could have not been implemented in the past. For example, the Constitutional Court of Kosovo has produced another document, another decision, that pretty much recognizes the claim of workers of a privatized company in Ferizaj and the amount of 22 million euros, while in the same time the law says that you cannot compensate workers more than 80% of the sale value of the firm, which was 5 million euros.
Da, ali zar nije malo konfuzno i nepraktično, evo sada ćemo se dotaći i zahteva Kosova za članstvo u Savet Evrope, gde su odluke suda, da tako kažemo, sveto pismo. I nije li malo konfuzno da se u jednom slučaju kunemo u Ustavni sud, a u drugom kažemo ne, to ne važi i tako? Zar nisu sve te odluke pravosnažne i koliko to može da utiče na opšte i taj proces članstva Kosova u Savet Evrope? Bila je skoro i Dora Bakojani izvestioc ovde. Nije li malo nelogično da se u jednom slučaju kunemo u odluku Ustavnog suda, a u drugom slučaju kažemo to ne važi?
Well, first, the application in the Council of Europe has started with the process of evaluation of the quality of Kosovar institution. The first report that was published says that Kosovo has a legal system, a framework that is in place, fully in line with the European standards. Now, how the process will move on, whether there will be some conditions and others, we don't know yet. And then we can only discuss them once they are presented in a written form. However, I am not claiming that all decisions of the Constitutional Court are per definition wrong or all of them are right. This government has won elections on the promise to deliver jobs and justice. So whenever the government believes that there is a disservice to justice, it is difficult to comply with such decisions. It's difficult to comply. It's not that we are negating them, but we say, well, if my job, if my promise to citizens is to deliver justice, when it is well known that a decision of the Constitutional Court is a product of corrupted environment, the least I can do is to publicly state that this decision, in my opinion, it's not that I can legally question them further, but in my opinion, it's not a product of a credible institution. It is not a secret, it's not a secret that the constitutional courts in all Western Balkans 6 are far from perfect. For example, Mr. Vučić, President Vučić, in Brussels, he takes the role of the head of the Constitutional Court and says, this is in line with the Constitution, this is not in line with the Constitution. This is another extreme. We are not taking that role. We say, well, it's the job of the Constitutional Court, but still we reserve the right to interpret such decisions.
Svako uređuje svoje dvorište, tako da i ovo pitanje vezano za Ustavni sud deluje malo, možda ne bismo ni trebali na ovaj način da komentarišemo odluke Ustavnog suda, one su obavezujuće. Nadam se da se slažemo da su obavezujuće. Ono što bih takođe, kada su sudovi u pitanju i odnos sa Evropskom unijom, postoji taj izveštaj gde se kaže da Kosovo zatvorenike drži jako dugo u pritvoru i da je preporuka da se to menja. Opet znam da nije možda deo vašeg polja delovanja, ali svakako ste prvi potpredsednik vlade i neko ko se bavi odnosima sa Evropskom unijom. Da li postoji mogućnost da se ovo pitanje reši i da li je taj zatvor, kako mnogi kažu, samo za Srbe, pošto uglavnom su u posljednje vreme hapšeni ljudi sa severa ili ljudi iz Pećkog regiona optuženi za ratne zločine koji su mesecima, neki od njih i godinama u pritvoru. Bez sudske presude.
First, let me identify a contradiction. Because in the previous section, we were discussing how the courts should be independent and their decisions should not be questioned.
Komentarišemo preporuku Evropske unije da se ljudi manje drže u pritvoru bez...
Can we agree that this is not a suggestion to the government, but to a body that should act completely independent, like the judicial? In Kosovo, the judicial part has on average more judges per 100,000 citizens than the average in Europe. In the case of prosecutors, it's a little bit less. But we also agree that there is a lot to be done so that the both judiciary and the prosecution is at the level that we would want to have. The part that I don't agree with you is that this problem is more present in the groups of a specific nationality. Actually, it is present everywhere in Kosovo, so without any special preference for participants of a special group. For example, the director of the biggest corporation in Kosovo was held, in our interpretation, completely nonsense, but for months in prison before any process started against him. So it's not a prerequisite or, let's say, a specialty based on ethnicity. It's exactly the opposite.
Ja samo prenosim ono što je stav naroda. Ne znam koliko imate priliku da razgovarate.
This is not the position of EU, the international report.
Konstatacija da je samo za Srbe, da, ali da je predugo, da su ljudi predugo u zatvoru, neosuđeni je preporuka Evropske unije da se tu naprave neke reforme. E sad, nemamo još puno vremena, ono što želim za kraj da vas pitam, bio sam na severu i tamo sam pričao sa nekim ljudima iz civilnog društva. Oni su mi rekli da ste imali jednu vrstu internog dijaloga i da je tu predloženo nekih 12 tačaka za rešavanje. To vam je predala organizacija ECDC, ako sam u pravu. Oni pitaju zašto ni jedna od tih tačaka još uvek nije ispunjena.
Well, the internal dialogue has started long ago, first with the intermediation of Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. The first meetings happened at the Swedish embassy, with the support of the Swedish embassy. Then we started to meet outside the embassy, in Gračanica, here in the government building, and so on. The participants are changing depending on the issues. It's not true that they have delivered to me a document of 12 points. They have delivered something like that to the international community. But the citizens that come to these meetings, or the organization of civil society, they present specific problems. For example, they say, we have the issue that the plenary sessions of the parliament are not being simultaneously translated. Problem solved. No, it is being translated. We identified the problem, decisions of the government are not being published on the website on the Serbian language. We have started to hire translators, but it's not easy to find translators. If artificial intelligence can do this, maybe it's easier to start. But we are working heavily on addressing every issue that they bring to my table. For example, in the last meeting, they brought the issue with some investments in the municipality of Leposavić, with a swimming pool and a stadium that is being flooded every spring because there was no protection wall on the side, and they wanted us to intervene with a partial extraordinary budget. When I started the idea of collecting the money, I was told that we have a bigger plan due to the Mediterranean Games. We want to have Leposavić as one of the cities where we will have part of the Olympic Games, Mediterranean Games, so we will invest much more in the sport infrastructure in the north, so it's even better than the initial request. So I'm trying to address every issue that they bring to me, but in addressing them we need full participation of the citizens and maybe a little bit more ownership on their side. So for ownership it means that if you believe as a representative of the civil society on the full integration in the institution, you should not be afraid to publicly say, yes, this is how we want to do, jointly, join forces with the government, and then I will find myself responsible for developing the solution and finding the funds for this.
Gospodine Bislimi, evo, hvala vam na ovim odgovorima. Za kraj bih vas samo pitao, je li imate neku poruku možda za našu publiku, za ljude koji nas prate?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to address Serb citizens, or your audience. I would want to have more opportunities to address our citizens of the Serb nationality. My message is Sretan Božić svima vama, uspešnu 2024 godinu. Ja sam spreman da radim sa vama na punu integraciju koja za mene uključuje i ekonomsku integraciju i spreman sam da posvećem puno više vremena, da možda i dođem tamo i direktno razgovaram sa svima vama o svakom problemu koji možete imati.
Hvala vam na izdvojenom vremenu. Ja vama želim da u narednoj godini imate mnogo bolji odnos i saradnju sa srpskom zajednicom i da u nekom narednom intervjuu govorimo o nekim lepšim temama.
Ja se nadam isto da ćemo drugi put razgovarati o uspešnim projektima, uspešnim brojima o zapošljavanju, uspjesima sportaša iz ovih općina, teme koje nas dovede zajedno.
Hvala vam. Bio je ovo gospodin Besnik Bislimi, prvi potpredsednik Vlade Kosova. Ostanite uz naš program. Prijetno.